if he's not working an esports event, if he's not on the golf course, if he's not doing one of the many different broadcasting projects, he's probably in an airport. And then maybe he's with me here. That's about it for Jeff Eisenband. He joins me on the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, known as an esports slash, you can call him golf, you can call him any other sport broadcaster. He does it all. He does it all. And he's going to share his story here on the Onto Something podcast. Of course, I'm Bryan Fenley, and this is going to be a lot of fun. Jeff, thanks so much for doing this. I'm excited to have you on here.
I saw ghosts and horror stories as I heard airport. Am I going back to the airport again? No. I'm glad to be sitting at home right now. No, you're exactly right though. It's been a lot of travel recently. So it's certainly all true, everything that you said.
You are trained at Northwestern, and I know one of the things that you're interested in and hope to see is Northwestern win national championships in different sports. So how far away, how close is that football team to winning it all?
How much time do you spend with Steve Weissman?
I love that guy.
I used to have in my social profiles, I used to have that one day Northwestern will win a national championship in basketball and football. That was sort of the thing that I put in, and I've taken that away because I wouldn't say I've lost the faith, but it's not what it once was. It's funny because Northwestern football the last couple of years is obviously, after making the Big Ten championship game 2 out of 3 years, 2 straight rough Big Ten seasons. And I always, I try to tweet optimistically, like, maybe it's next year, it's something like that. And I get all these messages from these Northwestern alums from the 70s and the 80s, and they're like, this is how it's always been. You just didn't know, kid. So I think I'm experiencing a real Northwestern experience, according to my elders right now.
If you could turn your life, Jeff, into a video game, what would you want to see?
Oh, man. I think obviously there's a lot of forms of video games. There's there's kind of adventure or story mode, and then there's sports games. I think it's some sort of story mode sports. I think that I'll get cliche here a little bit, but I think that, before anything in what I do, I love to tell stories. And, that's why you mentioned esports, which I had been even deeper into for a long time. Part of the reason that I was drawn to it was there were all these stories to tell that hadn't been told and no one was telling them. And obviously, in more traditional sports, take basketball, guys are covered at the AAU level from age 13 on. By the time they're pros, the storytelling is, in today's day and age, everything's already on the internet. So I loved to be able to tell those stories for the first time. So it's almost like I'm imagining a video game where you can see not just the superstars, but all of, the stories, the reasons that we love sports and covering sports and talking about sports, all of these, the grind that it takes beyond closed doors. Obviously, I worked a lot with NBA 2K, and I think you could say that they actually did a pretty good job, in kind of different modes, my player mode, creating a storyline that you had to go through with a player. So I think it's a life sports balance is what I'm thinking.
The life that people see, they see you out doing traditional sports broadcasts. They see you doing esports broadcasts. They see you interviewing high profile people and working with big brands. But what about your story do they not know?
Oh, I mean, a lot. I think that goes for everyone. I think that, I'm looking at New York City out my window. I can walk down the street, find 100 sports fans, and 99, maybe 100 are going to tell you that they could do my job, your job, all our jobs better than us, right? Because everyone thinks that they could talk about sports and that, it's that simple, it's that easy, and it's not. And I think that what I always go to, is dealing with failure and, getting your butt kicked and not taking it personally and realizing that life is a lot about percentages. And, it's not, sometimes we only hear the best stories, and we hear people that 100% of the time, everything went right for them. They got hired for their dream job when they were 24, and they lived it, not everyone's Joe Buck calling the World Series in their 20s. And I know for me, I started as a full-time with a full-time job. I was an editor for a website called thepostgame.com, which was the Yahoo Sports site. And then I left to go freelance when I felt like I had enough clout in the kind of New York City scene in the industry to, okay, I have enough to piece together 50% of my income. I need to find the other 50%. And the amount of, I think I'm now in my, I guess I've gone about 4 years and a month of freelance now. And the amount of things that that for me, I went after those first 2 years, I'd say, so many trials, so many things that didn't work out, so many things that I thought were going to work out that didn't, so many things that didn't necessarily become big, but led me to my next stop. Those are things that people just will never see. And like I said, dealing with hey, we're going to do a 3-episode trial that you're not going to get paid for, but you're going to, we're going to see if we're going to pick this up. You know what? We didn't pick it up. Or, hey, we're going to start this thing. We're going to have you host it, and hosting it a couple times. And then it's, you know what? We're going to try this other person as a host. And you have to, the best of the best deal with this. And they don't always vocalize it and talk about it. It ends up in their biography one day or their autobiography one day. And I think that that's just stuff that I've been very open about. I don't think I'm not frustrated to talk about failure, because I think there's so many people out there that need to hear it, because most people are going to fail. And it's a matter of who can, keep powering ahead after that.
I love what you just said there, Jeff, because I think what makes you so engaging to the listener, to the viewer, is your authenticity and your relatability. And when you're able to dig deep like that and be totally real with people and say, look, it hasn't always been easy, there's an extra level of respect that people have for you to be vulnerable like that I notice. And as someone like yourself who works with PGA Tour Live and works on their broadcasts, one of the big stats that's thrown around is bounce back percentage, or excuse me, bounce back birdie percentage, if you know what I mean. So your idea of
strokes gained, bounce back.
Yeah. Bounce back percent. Exactly. So where would you, in harkening back to the way in which you've taken adversities and maybe things haven't gone your way, to take your bounce back percentage, what is it? It's got to be pretty high.
Oof, that's a good question. I think that my bounce back percentage is not 100%, but, I like to say that it's 75 to 80, and that it's a lot of, like I said, it's a lot about swallowing pride. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that as in, I've worked on some things that I've been taken off of, and then I've been put back on. And, I think that obviously confidence is a lot of life. And, I've worked with, and this is a great freelance lesson. Sometimes I'll work with 5 different employers, and one of them is buying into everything that I'm doing, and they're supporting me, and I feel welcome, and I feel empowered, and I feel like they have my best interest, and they're trying to set me up for success. And then there's others that I, don't necessarily feel like they're providing all the resources and necessarily doing everything that they can to set me up. And sometimes they're throwing me out there in a situation where it's going to be a challenge, and it's almost definitely not going to work out. I don't know what it is behind closed doors. Maybe it's a budget thing. Maybe there are people that don't want it to work. But I think that like I said, you have to be willing to do the best you can at that. And that's a lesson that I think that has taken me some time to learn, that tune everything out. Don't worry what this person thinks internally, externally, whatever it may be. If you keep having the confidence that you're doing your best, that you're able to keep moving yourself forward, then you will move forward. Don't worry about what other people are saying here. Don't worry about how this similar person in the industry is performing. I think that's something that's incredibly hard for people to fathom and swallow and deal with, but that's an important part of it. And just keep, working your tail off, because people are going to see that both internally and obviously externally to the consumer. So that whole the whole idea of bouncing back, it's not an exact science, because you're not necessarily bouncing back with the same amount of power or the same amount of reach that you might have here, but it's important to find or piece together those bounce backs so that you can keep going forward. And, I always say, I've always felt like, just don't give people a reason to get rid of you, right? Give people reasons to keep you around, make yourself irreplaceable, and make it, to the point that it's not just about also how you perform on air, but what are you doing off air? Self-production is a big part of things, as doing this podcast that you're self-producing right now. That there's like I said, make other people's lives easier, and they're going to want to keep you around.
I love all those words that you said. As Jeff Eisenband is with me, traditional sports broadcaster. You can see him on the PGA Tour Live and so many other entities, esports as well. I'm Bryan Fenley, doing some golf, but traditionally as well, doing a lot of tennis channel commentating. And Jeff, to hear how grounded you are, there's a lot of people who want to think and want to attack their mentality, who work in the business, to think the way you do and to handle the ups and downs like you do. But it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you have gotten to that mental space, how have you done that?
Like I said, it's not an overnight process. I mean, all this stuff goes back to, I go all the way back to high school. I called sports in high school. I watch my tapes and I go, that was not good. I look back at things I did in college. I was telling a friend the other day, I wish that in college, I'm not saying I was a diva, but I came to college, I went to Northwestern, I wanted to do on-air broadcasting. So do a lot of people. And that's even a fraction of the people. The reason I didn't want to go to Syracuse was I didn't think that, they told me at Syracuse that maybe I'd get on air by senior year. I said, well, why would I want to do that? So I go to Northwestern, where I'm getting more opportunities early on, but I didn't want to do directing, producing, camera work, editing. And I had a lot of friends that did that. And I was a fine intermediate video editor. I understood framing of cameras and I understood production, but I didn't garner those skills that I wish, if I could go back, I would have worked a little more on getting those skills, because in my 20s, like I've brought up, that people like when employers will be happy if you can provide them with more than just one resource. If you're able to do multiple things, you're going to have a better chance to stick around in this industry. And I had to almost reteach myself some skills, and I had to learn some skills. And there were some skills that I just recognized, hey, I'm never going to be able to go back and take a 10-week course at Northwestern, a 20-week course at Northwestern. So I'm going to do the best that I can here. So I think that, the grounding comes with a lot of failure, a lot of things that I've tried, a lot of things that I thought I could do, and coming to terms with, what you can do in this industry, and how the process that it takes. I'm 29 and a half. I turned last week. So, most people, I'd say that to people, and a lot of people in the industry are like, especially in the golf industry, people are like, that sounds young. I say it in the esports industry, people are like, that sounds old. I say it, I say it to myself, and you set high expectations for yourself. I hoped that, I brought up that Joe Buck example. Like, I hoped that I would be calling sports on a national TV level by age 30. And I'm not. I'm doing really cool stuff. PGA Tour Live on ESPN Plus is as close as you can get to being, it's not TV, but it is TV. Yeah. It's streaming. And in today's modern age, it's basically TV. I've done a couple other things. I am doing stuff for MSG Networks, which is TV. I'm not a studio host, and I'm not necessarily calling, I'm for one of the teams, I'm saying, and I'm not doing play-by-play, but I'm there. I'm in the building. I'm producing content that is airing out to New York City on TV. So I'm knocking on that door, but I think that it's that I've realized that it takes some time. And that's what I always tell. I spoke to Joe Favorito, who's a great guy out here in New York, kind of, I call him, the Don of New York sports, that he knows everyone. He does everything in PR, and he, teaches a class at Columbia grad students that I was at recently. And I say this to a lot of students, that, you're not going to get your dream job right out of college. And I think that a lot of people kind of just are thinking their mindset is, how do I get to my dream job? And I say, it's not about how you get to your dream job tomorrow. It's about how do you get to your dream job 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? What is the next step? What are the steps to take? And maybe they're not necessarily there, but what is a step forward, or what is something that will open the doors for the next step? And I think just enjoying the process, enjoying the journey is something that I pride myself on, that I did that in my 20s for the most part. There were points that obviously were frustrating, but I think that that was an important sort of, you go back to your freshman year of college a little bit when you're done with college, right? Where you're meeting people for the first time again, you're shaking hands for the first time, you're networking for the first time. And I think some people embrace that, some people don't, but I think to move on up and to be successful and to start somewhere, you have to embrace that. And almost unlike in college, when you get to senior year and you feel like you know everyone, you have to keep going kind of forever in this industry, that you're meeting new people, experiencing new things. And if you come to terms with the fact that you haven't been everywhere, you don't know everyone, and you don't know everything early on, I think that process goes easier.
How big is your Rolodex?
I mean, what is that? I don't want to call that an outdated term,
Right?
but
Yeah, nobody has one, but I think you get what I mean as far as your
yeah.
vast networking skills.
So I love to tell people, before the pandemic started, you could go to 365 networking events in New York City, and I'm sure LA. You could go to 365 sports business or sports media networking events a year. You could find one every day, whether that be a legitimate, we are having a networking event, whether that be a panel event that everyone's hanging around after, whether it be some sort of meetup, or, there's a World Cup watch party here. You could go to 365 events and meet people every day if you wanted here in New York. And I think for me, and this is why I encourage people, a lot of people come to me and they say, hey, I'm thinking about going freelance right out of college or early on. And I say, no, I don't recommend that, because for me, the best thing that I had was a full-time role where I was an editor at a smaller sports publication that got me in the door to all these places that I could say, I'm covering this. A lot of those networking events, by the way, I went to as a media. I got the media pass to cover the event, and then I could cover things. I could interview people, and I could meet everyone while I was there. So it's a lot of, I was working this job. I was hustling. I was networking as much as I could, night after night, day after day. And that was, to your point about the Rolodex, that's when I got to a point that it took about 3 to 4 years to feel like, okay, I have met enough people. I've met enough people that I could work with. I've met enough people that have said, hey, let's work together one day, to say, okay, now let's put this to the test and let's see, if I could reach out to all these contacts and this can amount to something. And by the way, most people said at first, no, or I'll let you know when we have something. It was not an overnight sort of, great, you left your job, you're freelance, let's work together tomorrow. It was not as seamless as that.
Well, you go back to something earlier. It's about percentages, and based upon the vast amount of people that at some point, those people you reach out to, something is going to break for you. And it did, and it will continue to. Jeff Eisenband is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley with Tennis Channel, also a golf broadcaster. Jeff, the idea for you let's look at it like this. For you to be so centered on what you want to do at such an early age, that's not something a lot of people can attest to. Before you worked with the post game, before you gained those skills as a journalist that would then take you from working as an editor to being on camera, if I were to see signs of you as a child that would give me a foreshadowing that one day you would take your life in this direction, what would you be giving off?
Well, I was sports obsessed growing up. I think that was just the way I was raised, with a younger brother, and my dad was, you are going to, you're going to play sports and you're going to study in school. Like, that is what you're doing. And, whether it was being ultra competitive in Little League. My dad coached all my Little League teams. We still will be sitting around the Thanksgiving table, we'll be sitting around a holiday table, and we are referencing pitching decisions that he made and fielding alignment when I was 11 years old. If we would have put this kid in right field instead of third base, he might have made that play and we might have gone to the World Series in the Larchmont Mamaroneck Little League. Like, we still talk about that sort of stuff. So it was late nights. It was watching sports late night, the 2001 World Series. I was insistent on keeping the book. Okay. Which means we had the scorebook, my dad and this was a West Coast. I was in New York. So the games in Arizona, we couldn't stay up for necessarily. So I made my dad, when I had to go to sleep, keep the book. So we had the book from that whole World Series, everything. Game 6, the Yankees got crushed by the Diamondbacks. One of those where the Diamondbacks batted around, I think 1 or 2 innings off Andy Pettitte. We had to go to the next column, literally all this stuff that no one was ever going to see, that everything was public out there. Like, you can go to Baseball Reference and you can find all this stuff. But I think that is telling of how obsessive I was about sports and notes and stats and everything beyond just playing the games.
Those early interactions, the mentoring, the sports mentoring of your father, when you think about what you're doing now, how much of that drive comes in the form of you wanting to please that younger self, and your dad, who got you started early on, and wanting to gain approval and validation from him?
Well, I want to include my mom in that also, because she was right there with us, going to all these games, taking us to all these sporting events, and kind of prioritizing that in a family where we also prioritize school. So it's not like, we weren't doing both. But I think it was that, it was a competitive edge that was instilled in both my brother and myself. And I think that my parents recognized that, it was both a way for me to build character and a way for me to have a sort of, something that drove me. That was my thing. That was an oasis from everything. I was never really drawn to any vices in middle school or high school, because all I was doing was playing sports, and like I said, going to class, and I had friends, but, I think that sports was something that was always driving me, and always driving, like, I have to be better at this. I have to practice at this. I have to do more. I'll say that the only crutch was that I played too many sports. I was good at everything. I wasn't great at everything. I played a lot of baseball, a lot of basketball, a lot of golf, a lot of tennis, a lot of soccer. I was, my brother played hockey. Like, we played so much that, and it was always about, I'm not a big guy, I wasn't necessarily going to be a physical specimen, but I would hustle in everything that I was doing. If I was playing basketball and we were playing zone defense in the Westchester Jewish Basketball League, I was up at the strong side of the zone doing whatever I could to run out and put pressure on the point guard. If I was playing baseball, I didn't have the arm to play shortstop or third base by the time I got to, 8th grade baseball or high school, but I was going to play second base. And if my jersey wasn't dirty by the end of the game, there was a problem out there. So that was just always, that was what both my parents really instilled. Was they said they'd never be disappointed in me in school or sports if I was clearly putting my best foot forward. So that was what I always did.
And by throwing yourself into sports like that and never taking seemingly a day off as a kid, and always bunching up your schedule with different sporting events, how was it an escape for you when dealing with the rigors of life?
Well, one thing that I'll say, I went to summer camp at a camp called Camp Greylock, which Darren Ravel and Ian Rappaport both came out of. So I think we're also kind of a factory for sports journalism. Lawrence Frank, the Nets and Pistons coach, went there, and kind of an ultra competitive all sports summer camp. And that was, to me, always an oasis and a getaway from kind of, you get to middle school and you start to get grades, and there starts to be more social pressures, and then high school. And that was always, for me, kind of a 7-week period where I could not just get better at sports, but just kind of get get all that out there, be competitive, be on my own, from a sports sense, learn practice techniques and training techniques to get better, be competitive within friends and within people. We obviously played other camps, but we internally did a lot of stuff. And I think that was an important kind of, I go back and just feel like that was important growth for me, just to kind of really focus on just sports for a certain amount of time.
Going back to when you focus just on sports and how you've turned this into a career, the idea of interviewing for you, and what I noticed about you from an early start is that you have this self-belief that when you're doing an interview, you own the interview. You have a command, you have a presence, and that way your interviewee gives you that much the respect and the great answers that make your conversations so worthwhile and so valuable. When you're doing an interview, what do you want the experience to be like for the person on the other side?
I want the person on the other side to unknowingly fall into conversation mode. Yes. I don't want, right. It's not about coming in. I like to come into interviews researched, but with topics, with potential questions, knowing I might not hit everything. You never know where something's going to go, where you're going to have to follow up, but kind of, making it on my end too, not just a ping pong of I have to get to these 10 questions. Yes. What is your favorite color? More of like, hey, what's your favorite color? Like more casual to get to the point that person just feels like they're having a conversation. And it goes back to what I said about freshman year of college, after college, just kind of just schmoozing. And when you're in these networking settings, just asking people questions after questions. I was encouraged early on about just when you're meeting people for the first time, keep asking questions and, be the inquisitive one and keep going, and not like existential sort of like, what do you think about the ocean? But but actually timely, relevant questions that aren't uncomfortable, putting people in uncomfortable situations, but just, having a conversation, following up on things, making eye contact, smiling, making people feel like they're talking about comfortable topics. And of course, from an interview perspective, there is a science to, don't necessarily come in guns blazing with your first question being the amazing hard-hitting question that you're trying to get out of this person. Reel them in a little bit, make them comfortable, because they're also feeling you out on the other side. Is this the person that I want to give all this information to? Do I feel comfortable with this person yet? So it's, as you start to get that person to warm up, and this, Bryan, the amount of questions that you ask in that, if you have a 15-minute interview, the amount of questions that you ask in the first 5 minutes that you have no intention of ever using, if this is a tape product, or ever caring about, that's not going to be the main clip that comes from this, that's not going to be the main takeaway. Of course you have to ask those questions just to get people going.
As a question asker yourself, what is the one answer to a question that you're seeking out?
Oof, man. I don't, I think that I got to think about that one, because in sports, sometimes I'll be honest, I sit there as a sports journalist and I think to myself, why would this person answer our questions? Like, what does this athlete have to get out of things? I think that, I think that I'm very into understanding athletes beyond just sports, and what can they accomplish beyond, from a more progressive communal, sort of thing. One of the most interesting, I guess, media scrums that I was a part of, a couple of years ago, I went to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar he was getting an award, and it was at Ellis Island. And we got to take the kind of the ferry to Ellis Island with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who, wow, if you just, a larger than life figure that did not necessarily treat any of us or anyone around him like we were his inferiors. He was on that boat kind of, he said something like, I think I did this ride and, like 50 years ago or something. And he was just kind of enjoying it with us, enjoying the Ellis Island Museum with us. And then listening to him talk about, obviously the award he was getting and being able to ask him some questions. I think that's an example of, for many reasons, an individual who everyone should, strive to be like in terms of both the athletic prowess that he had, but also how much he's taken it upon himself to, do more in society. And I think that those athletes, I don't expect every athlete to be like that. I think that'd be, just because a star athlete doesn't give back in that sort of way, that doesn't make them a failure, that doesn't make them a bad person. But I think continuing to find out more of these athletes and what they could do to do more. I think Stephen Curry is going to be an example of someone who you can already see the seeds planted, and LeBron James of individuals who are going to do more. A lot of people thought that was going to be what Kobe was going to be like. And I think that, we're just going to continue to see that from, this isn't calling them out, but like the Mannings, for example, doing incredible stuff out there in public. But what can they do to have a legacy that goes beyond just they're really good at their sport and funny on TV?
That dynamic, how do you weigh that mentally in your own struggle between here's what I got to do from a career standpoint, this is what I'm gunning for, but also the richness of life and being there for people and the wholeness of life that maybe when you're hustling and bustling and grinding out your next move in the business, that sort of takes you away from that.
To be honest, I think that's why I didn't want to be a beat reporter. I didn't want to just be someone that was reporting facts. I don't want to be just someone that's kind of straight dry, not, I don't want to say dry news, but, it's like straight, this is what I have to be. That's part of why I want to be more in front of the camera. I want to be a commentator. I want to be a personality because, take golf, for example, which has become, I would say, the majority of my work is now done in golf. Golf is a sport that has been incredible for so many years, but like so many sports, can do better, opening up its doors for more individuals. And I think that I'm not big enough yet. So there's nothing I can do quite yet, but it's something that I kind of have as a goal of mine and a dream of mine to continue to open this sport up to more people. I think it'll benefit golf in the long run if more people are playing golf, if golf is more accessible, if golf is more meaningful to people. And I think that, that's something that over the next few years, I would love to take part in ways to open golf's doors to more people to experience. We started this conversation talking a little bit about why were sports important to me? Why did I spend so much time? And I think that they made me a better person and built character in me and kind of made me more comfortable with life. And I think that the same thing can be done on the golf course for more people, because let me tell you a secret, Bryan. You don't have to be that athletic to participate in golf. It's actually something that a lot of people can do, and a lot of people can have that opportunity if the resources, whether that be availability on golf courses, whether that be equipment, whether that be balls, whatever it may be, is available. I think that there's a lot of good that could be done in the sport.
You say, Jeff, that you're not big in stature, but then when I see some of these videos of you piping a drive about 310 down the fairway, I'm saying to myself, how is he doing this?
310 is definitely not accurate unless I'm going straight down a hill. Well, it's funny because I just had a Scratch, which is a subsidiary of the PGA Tour.
I saw that. I love that. That was so fun.
We just did a video and we taped some of me playing golf at Hake Point, which is a course in Defusky Island, South Carolina. And I'm a little nervous because I'm playing with the head pro there, and this is PGA Tour officials taping me, and I'm thinking, I don't want to hold everything up. I don't want to do anything. And the adrenaline is pumping. We've been filming for like 6 hours to this point, and I just crush a drive. And I feel so good. And then I think back in the back of my head, I go, oh no, they're going to think I'm good. And then of course I struggled I think I chunked my second shot. I chunked my third shot. I'm like rolling up to the green and came back to reality. But yeah, I had the adrenaline pump for a second there.
You did. And I think when you look at your career, it's one, and it will continue to be one crush drive after another. And
Too kind.
as we
Too
wrap,
kind.
as I hope we get a chance to play golf sometime. And as we wrap up this conversation, what I love, and I think as this conversation progressed, we got to learn something that I really wanted to highlight about you, Jeff, and that is you can be so work focused on building and growing and becoming the bigger and bigger brand that you are, but you can put your hand out and say, come with me, take people with me. You pointed out the big celebrities that are doing that. You're on a mission as well. It's not just the work. The work is beyond that for you. And that's what I loved about this conversation that I think we ultimately got to. Is it for you, Jeff? It means more. And
The SEC. No, sorry.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So, obviously that would be the catchphrase of the SEC, but I think it applies for you as well.
No, I think I obviously appreciate, I'm not on the stature of the people that you mentioned, but I think that, why I love this business and why I continue to be driven in it, even though it kicks you around sometimes, is because, it's natural. And I think that that's where, like, someone asked me recently, what were your trips like recently? I had something, and I said, it was work. And they're like, yeah, it was work. But in my head, I was like, I felt comfortable. I woke up every day being able to work, being able to just talk about sports or esports, whatever it may be, is endemic to my personality. And I think that that's where you just find it easier to be unselfish in that sort of way, in terms of just doing it, not worrying about, I think too many people are looking over their shoulder. Just, if you enjoy whatever you do, just do it. Just, again, sorry for the catchphrase, Nike, just do it and enjoy it, and people will gravitate toward that.
There's a lot of catchphrases that I think that you've adopted from other people, but I think as your career continues to evolve,
I need to develop
grow,
my own, that.
it's coming. It's coming. Yeah. And you know what? You're going to utter it, and you're going to be like, I'm going to hold on to that. It's going to come out of the blue. You're not even going to be thinking about it. And having this conversation with you, we got to see who you are underneath the man who's on the screen, the guy who really cares and is grounded and is destined for stardom if he already is there. I think he is, but it's going to continue to grow from here. Jeff Eisenband, with sports, traditional sports, esports, PGA Tour Live, MSG Networks, the list goes on. I'm Bryan Fenley with Tennis Channel, also a golf broadcaster. Jeff, thanks so much for doing this and going, I guess, underneath the layers of who you are to really understand what drives you.
Thank you for having me. I hope so. I hope that those layers continue to pile on up.